Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine you're a business, right? You've just secured your shiny new trademark.
Hmm.
And then you spot a domain name that matches it perfectly. You think, fantastic, that's clearly ours for the taking.
Seems logical at first glance.
But what if, in actually going after that domain, you end up getting accused of something, well, pretty serious, reverse domain name hijacking?
Exactly.
Today, we're doing a deep dive into a really fascinating case. It's basically a masterclass in the tricky world of domain name disputes and trademark law.
Yeah, we've got the sources right here, the official WIPO panel decision, expert analysis, all focusing on this Tyrone.com dispute.
Right.
And our mission for you today isn't just to cover what happened. We want you to understand why this outcome is such a critical lesson. It's about domain ownership complexities, specifically under the UDRP, the Uniform Domain Name Dispute Resolution Policy.
An area most people probably don't think about until, well, it's too late.
Precisely. Those UDRP rules can have some unexpected twists.
Okay, so let's set the scene for this digital showdown over Tyrone.com. Who were the main players here?
Okay, so on one side, you've got the complainant. That was Corcreevy Pty Ltd. They're an Australian construction company.
Ah, okay.
They operate as Tyrone Masonry and Tyrone Group, and they were represented by an Australian law firm, Bennett Litigation and Commercial Law.
And what were they trying to do?
Their goal was pretty straightforward.
Mm,
Get the Tyrone.com domain name.
makes sense.
They argued it was identical to their Tyrone trademark. Now, this trademark is what's called a figurative mark, Australian Trademark Registration Number 2438520. And this is important. Corcreevy Pty Ltd. Acquired and registered this mark on March 27, 2024.
March 2024. Okay, that date sounds pretty recent. So who's on the other side? Who held the domain?
That was the respondent, a company called Anything.com Ltd.
Anything.com, okay.
Yeah, and they were represented by esquire.com PC, based over in the United States.
Yeah, got it. So here's where it gets really interesting, right? You'd think a brand new trademark registered just this year gives the complainant a pretty strong case, especially if the domain's identical.
You would think so.
But what did Anything.com Ltd, the respondent, bring to the table about their ownership of Tyrone.com?
Well, this is the crux of it. They came back with some absolutely critical evidence. Their ownership of Tyrone.com started way before Corcreevy's trademark even existed.
How far back are we talking?
Many, many years. They had historical WHOIS records proving Anything.com held the domain since at least 2004.
2004. Wow.
And the registration data actually pointed back to May 13, 2002. They even made a claim going back to 1998.
Okay, hold on. 2002, maybe even 1998, compared to a trademark from 2024.
Exactly. The WIPO panel explicitly pointed this out. They said the respondent's domain registration predated the complainant's incorporation when the company was even formed in 2011.
Right.
And it predated their adoption of the Tyrone mark by, like, 2 decades before the trademark registration in 2024.
So a domain held for potentially over 20 years versus a trademark registered just months ago. That's a massive difference. Did Anything.com have a good reason for holding a name like Tyrone? It sounds like, just a name.
They did, and they explained it. They pointed out Tyrone is a pretty common first name.
True.
And their whole business model involves acquiring, holding, and then reselling generic or name-based domain names as investments.
Ah, a domain investor.
Precisely. And they clarified that this kind of activity, registering generic or name domains for resale, is generally considered a legitimate business. The key proviso is that there's no intent to specifically target a trademark holder.
Okay, that makes sense. So this whole thing played out under the UDRP, the Uniform Domain Name Dispute Resolution Policy. We know it has these key tests. For anyone listening who isn't familiar, what's the basic stuff a complainant has to prove to win a UDRP case?
Right. So to win, the complainant has to nail down 3 specific things.
3 things, okay.
First, the domain name has to be identical or confusingly similar to their trademark. That one's often straightforward.
Okay. Second, they need to show the respondent the domain holder has no rights or legitimate interests in the name.
Right. No legitimate reason to have it.
Exactly. And third, and this is often the big hurdle they have, to prove the domain name was registered and is being used in bad faith.
Both registered and used in bad faith, not just one or the other.
Correct. Both elements are crucial.
So how does that bad faith part work when you've got a domain name with such a long history, like Tyrone.com?
Well, that's where a fundamental UDRP principle comes in, and it's fascinating. Generally, a domain name that was registered long before a trademark even came into existence cannot normally be considered registered with that specific trademark in mind.
Logically, how could it be?
Exactly. The panel looked at this and found zero evidence that anything.com could have possibly been thinking about Corcreevy Pty Ltd's future trademark way back when they registered the domain. I mean, the complainant's business wasn't even around then.
Well, wait, didn't you say the complainant, Corcreevy, argued that anything.com had acquired the domain more recently, like between 2022 and 2024? Yes, they did make that assertion. That was part of their argument that the acquisition was recent.
Why claim that if the record showed otherwise? Was the record unclear at first?
That's a really important point. Corcreevy did assert this recent acquisition, but the panel found those claims were, well, completely unsupported by the actual evidence. Now, sometimes, with WHOIS privacy rules, some ownership details might be redacted or hidden initially. That can create a bit of uncertainty.
Okay, so maybe they had some initial doubt.
Maybe initially. But the panel noted that in this case, the full registration information was eventually disclosed by the domain registrar. And that info clearly showed anything.com's long-standing ownership, going back to at least 2004, maybe earlier.
So the proof was there eventually.
Yes. And the panel pointed out that despite this clear evidence becoming available, the complainant still chose to proceed with their complaint, sticking to factual statements that they really should have known were incorrect at that point.
Ah, okay. And that leads us directly to this big twist, doesn't it? Not only did Corcreevy lose their case to get the domain,
Right, the transfer was denied.
but the WIPO panel took it a major step further. They found Corcreevy guilty of reverse domain name hijacking. That sounds serious. It's not just losing, it's like being penalized for trying. What exactly is RDNH?
It is serious. It really raises questions about using the UDRP system properly. RDNH happens when someone files a UDRP complaint in bad faith.
Bad faith filing it.
Yes. It's seen as an abuse of the whole administrative process. Usually, it's an attempt to unfairly grab a domain name from its rightful owner, maybe through harassment or by leveraging a trademark improperly.
So it's more than just having a weak case that fails.
Oh, definitely. Just losing your case isn't enough to get an RDNH finding. It has to be more than that.
So what pushes it over the line? What makes the panel say, okay, this wasn't just a failed case, this was an abuse?
A really key factor is when the panel concludes the complainant knew or reasonably should have known that they couldn't possibly succeed with their complaint based on the rules.
Knew or should have known.
Exactly. And this often comes up in situations just like this one, where there's crystal clear evidence that the domain name was registered long before the complainant's trademark rights ever existed.
Like the huge time gap here.
Precisely. Another big factor is pushing forward with factually incorrect statements, or, like we saw here, just ignoring clear evidence of prior registration, especially after the full correct information comes to light.
And how did the panel say Corcreevy met those criteria in this specific case? What were the key reasons for the RDNH finding against them?
Well, the WIPO panel was very explicit. They stated the complainant knew or should have known that it could not succeed.
Ouch.
They pointed directly to that clear evidence of anything.com's long-standing prior registration. The panel acknowledged that, sure, maybe initial WHYS redaction caused some doubt.
Right, the privacy thing.
But they stressed that any such doubt should have been completely removed once the full unredacted registration info was provided.
So once the facts were clear?
Once the facts were clear, yes. And despite that clarity, the complainant still decided to press on with a complaint built on factual statements they should have recognized as wrong.
Yeah.
And that, the panel said, warranted the RDNH finding.
So bottom line, what was the final verdict for the Tyrone.com domain? And beyond just not getting the domain, what are the real-world consequences for a company that gets hit with an RDNH finding?
Okay, so the main outcome, obviously, is the request to transfer the domain name is denied flat out. The complaint fails completely.
Right, domain stays put.
Domain stays put. But beyond that, when there's an RDNH finding, the panel is actually required by the rules to formally declare in its decision that the complaint was brought in bad faith and that it constitutes an abuse of the process.
So it's officially documented.
Officially documented in a public decision. Now, the sources we looked at don't detail specific fines or formal penalties beyond that in this case. But that public finding of RDNH can have a really significant negative impact on the complainant's reputation. It essentially broadcasts that they tried to improperly take a domain name from someone who held it legitimately.
Yeah, that doesn't look good. And in this specific case, the panel's decision was pretty clear-cut.
Absolutely unambiguous. The panel, Jane Seeger was the presiding panelist. Along with Luca Barbero and Jeremy Spears, they issued their decision on July 22, 2025.
Okay.
And the final ruling was, quote, deny the transfer of the domain Tyrone.com with a finding of RDNH. Clear win for anything.com and a pretty stark lesson for Corcreevy.
Wow. This Tyrone.com story, it really is more than just some legal case file, isn't it? It feels like a really potent practical lesson for anyone working online today. What really jumps out at you about just how vital it is to know the full history, the full context of a domain name before you even think about making a claim, especially if it involves a generic word or a common name.
You know, connecting this to the bigger picture, what it really drives home is that having a trademark, even a registered one, it's a strong right, absolutely. But it is not some kind of automatic key to unlock any domain name you want.
Not a blank check.
Not at all. It just dramatically highlights how crucial thorough due diligence is. You have to understand the unique rules of domain law, especially how these registration dates work and how that very specific bad faith standard is applied.
Right.
Before you even start a dispute, you need to be pretty confident you actually have a case under those rules. It's a huge reminder that just because you have a trademark doesn't mean every matching domain name is suddenly yours for the taking.
Yeah, the Tyrone.com case really serves as this stark warning, doesn't it? In this really complex intersection of IP law and digital real estate, history matters a lot. And going after a domain without having all your facts straight, without understanding that history, can backfire spectacularly. What do you think this means for people trying to navigate this digital world where maybe the oldest claim doesn't always win, but as we saw here, it can carry surprising weight and even completely flip the script?
Well, consider this perspective. If you think about a domain name as almost being innocent until proven guilty of bad faith registration and use, how does that change the way we think about what it means to truly own a piece of the internet? Especially when that piece is something like a common name or a dictionary word, something that likely existed as a concept, or even as a registered domain long before any specific company or brand decided they wanted it. It really makes you question the burden of proof and what genuine digital ownership looks like in these scenarios.